He thought it was just a quiet road through the frozen hills, until his dog refused to take another step. No barking, no warning, just a stare into the darkness below, like something was waiting to be found. Minutes later, a burning car appeared out of nowhere, but there were no screams, no bodies, no signs of an accident. Only footprints leading into the forest, and a man who seemed to be waiting to be rescued. What the Navy SEAL didn't know was this wasn't a rescue.
Easy does it.
It was a setup, and he had just
We're
walked
here to
into
help.
it. Because sometimes the road doesn't lead you home. It leads you to the truth someone tried to bury. Where are you watching from? And how did this story make you feel? Don't forget to like and subscribe to support more stories like this. The road curved like a scar carved into the side of the mountain, narrow and unforgiving, pressed between a wall of frozen pine and a sheer drop into a river that never stopped moving. Caleb Rourke drove without music. He hadn't turned it on since leaving the base. Silence to him wasn't empty. It was familiar. At 41, Caleb had the kind of presence people noticed without understanding why. He stood about 6 feet tall, lean and tightly built, not the kind of strength that showed off, but the kind that stayed quiet until it was needed. His face was clean-shaven, sharp where it mattered, a square jaw, high cheekbones, and skin that still carried the faint burn of northern wind. His dark brown hair was cut short in a military style, just a fraction longer than regulation, enough to suggest he no longer belonged entirely to it. His eyes, gray-blue, never rested in one place for long. They scanned, measured, remembered. Even now, behind the wheel of an old pickup truck rattling gently over packed snow, those eyes moved the same while they had in places far colder, far louder, far more final. But tonight, there was no mission. At least, that's what he told himself. Beside him, in the passenger seat, Orion lifted his head. The German Shepherd didn't move suddenly. He never did. Everything about Orion was controlled, trained into him through years of search and rescue work alongside Caleb. At 4 years old, Orion was in his prime, a working dog's body, lean and muscular, built for endurance rather than display. His coat was a deep mix of black and dark gold, the black forming a saddle across his back and mask over his face, the gold catching what little light remained like something almost warm in a frozen world. A faint scar traced the edge of his left ear, thin, barely noticeable unless you knew where to look. Caleb knew. Orion's ears tilted forward, not alert, not aggressive. Listening. Caleb didn't react immediately. He kept his hands steady on the wheel, the old tactical watch on his wrist catching a dull reflection from the dashboard light. The road ahead dipped slightly, curving out of sight around a bend carved into the cliff. Easy, Caleb murmured, more habit than concern. Orion didn't look at him. That was the first sign something was off. The second was subtler. The dog didn't shift his weight. He didn't tense, he just stopped being at ease. Caleb exhaled slowly, the kind of breath a man takes when he feels something familiar returning. Not fear, not exactly. Recognition. He eased off the accelerator. The truck slowed. Snow hissed softly under the tires. The trees on either side leaned inward, heavy with frost. Their branches bowed like old men listening to something they didn't want to hear. The river below roared, distant but constant, a sound that never fully left the background, like a memory that refused to fade. Orion stood up. That was the moment Caleb knew this wasn't nothing. Orion didn't stand unless there was a reason. The dog stepped forward, placing his front paws near the edge of the dashboard, his body angled slightly toward the windshield, but not at the road, at something beyond it. Caleb followed the line of his gaze. They were approaching a bend. The third bend. Something in Caleb's chest tightened, not sharply, not painfully, just enough to make him aware of it. A sensation he hadn't felt in years, not since... No. He cut the thought before it formed. "Sit," Caleb said quietly. Orion didn't. That was the second sign something was wrong. As the truck rolled into the curve, Orion made a sound. Not a bark, not a growl, a low, almost uncertain exhale, something between recognition and warning. And in that exact second, Caleb heard it. Not through the speakers, not through the radio, inside his head. A voice distorted like it was breaking through static. "Don't stop at the third bend." Caleb's hands tightened on the wheel. The truck drifted slightly before he corrected it. His pulse didn't spike. It didn't need to. Because fear wasn't what he felt. It was something worse. Memory, but not one he could place. He hadn't heard his father's voice in 18 years, and yet, that was it. Clear as if it had been spoken right beside him. Caleb blinked once. The road straightened slightly beyond the bend. Nothing there. No car. No movement. Just snow, just trees. Just the same quiet that had followed him for miles. But Orion didn't relax. He stayed standing, watching, waiting, as if something had just passed by them, unseen. Caleb swallowed. "You heard that too?" he muttered under his breath, though he already knew the answer. Orion's ears flicked, not toward Caleb, toward the side of the road. Caleb glanced over. There was nothing there. Just a slope leading down toward the river, jagged rocks barely visible beneath layers of white. He forced his grip to loosen slightly. This was fatigue. That's all. He'd been on deployment too long, sleeping in fragments, waking to alarms, to wind, to silence that meant something different than this. His mind was catching up. That was normal. That was explainable. He'd driven worse roads, seen worse things. This was just a mountain road in winter. He shifted in his seat, rolling his shoulder once, trying to shake off the lingering tension. "Almost there," he said. Orion didn't respond. The dog slowly lowered himself back into the seat, but not fully. His body remained slightly raised, muscles not quite at rest, as if he were prepared to stand again at any moment. Caleb noticed that. Of course he did. He noticed everything. That was the problem. He drove on. The sky above was beginning to dim, the pale gray bleeding into something deeper, colder. Night came early out here, not with a sudden drop, but with a slow erasing of color until everything became the same shade of waiting. The cabin wasn't far now. His father's cabin. The word still felt strange. Home didn't fit. It never had. Not after... Caleb tightened his jaw. The memory tried again. He pushed it down. Outside, the wind shifted slightly, brushing across the truck like a hand testing its presence. The road narrowed. The trees grew thicker. And Orion leaned forward again, slowly, deliberately. Caleb didn't ask this time. He just followed the dog's line of sight. And that's when he saw it. Far ahead, through the trees, a faint flicker. Orange. Too steady to be reflected light. Too low to be the sky. Caleb's foot eased off the accelerator again. The truck slowed. His heartbeat didn't change, but something else did. The air. It felt heavier, denser, like the moment before something reveals itself, or before you realize it already has. Orion stood fully now. No hesitation, no uncertainty. Every muscle in his body aligned, not in panic, not in aggression, in purpose. Caleb's voice dropped, barely more than a breath. "What is it, boy?" Orion didn't look at him. The flicker ahead grew stronger. Not large, not explosive. Controlled, contained. Like something burning that wasn't meant to be seen. Caleb felt it again. That pull. Not curiosity. Not duty. Something deeper. The same instinct that had kept him alive in places where hesitation meant death. The same instinct that had made him step forward when others stepped back. He hadn't felt it since leaving the service. Until now. The truck rolled closer. The light sharpened. And just before the road opened enough for him to see what was waiting ahead, Caleb realized something. He hadn't stopped at the third bend. But whatever was ahead had been waiting anyway. The truck came to a stop with a soft crunch of snow beneath its tires. Caleb didn't turn off the engine immediately. He sat there, hands still on the wheel, eyes fixed ahead, not on the flames themselves, but on the space around them. Fire always told a story, not just how something burned, but why. The sedan sat crooked at the edge of the road, its rear angled toward the drop, its front still pointing vaguely forward as if it had tried to correct itself at the last second and failed. But there were no skid marks, no deep tire gouges in the snow, no shattered debris scattered across the road. Just placement. Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly. "That's not a crash," he muttered. Beside him, Orion let out a slow breath. The dog didn't rush forward. He didn't bark. His ears remained upright, but his body stayed close to the truck door, muscles coiled, not in fear, but in calculation. Caleb finally turned the engine off. Silence returned, heavier this time. The fire crackled softly, eating through something beneath the hood. Wires, plastic, remnants of a system that had once been controlled. Now it was just heat and smoke. Caleb stepped out. Cold air hit him hard, sharp against his skin, biting through the worn fabric of his tactical shirt as if it had been waiting for him. His boots pressed into the snow, firm, steady. Orion followed, landing beside him without a sound. The dog moved slightly ahead, nose low, drawing in the scent of the scene. Burning fuel, hot metal, and something else. Something faint. Human. But not fresh. Caleb approached the sedan slowly, his posture relaxed but ready, the kind of movement that suggested he wasn't worried about what he could see. Only what he couldn't. The driver's side door was open, not torn open, not forced. Opened, deliberately. He crouched slightly, eyes tracing the ground. There. Tracks. Not clean footprints. Too disturbed for that. But enough. Someone had stepped out, dragged something, or been dragged. The snow was compressed unevenly, one side deeper than the other, like a leg that couldn't carry weight. Caleb followed the pattern. It led away from the car, toward the trees. Orion reached the edge of the tracks first, then stopped. He lowered his head, inhaled deeply once, and stepped back. That made Caleb pause. "What is it?" Orion didn't respond. He simply shifted his stance, placing himself slightly in front of Caleb, not blocking, but positioning, between. Caleb understood that instinct. He'd felt it himself. Something about the scene didn't match the story it was trying to tell. He stood up slowly, scanning the vehicle again. The fire was too controlled, too contained. If this had been an accident, the fuel line rupture would have created a more chaotic burn, faster spread, uneven flame patterns. This was almost neat, like someone had poured just enough fuel to make it look real. Caleb stepped closer to the rear of the car. The trunk was slightly ajar, not open, not closed. He hesitated for half a second, then lifted it. Inside, empty. No luggage. No personal items. No sign this car had been used for travel at all. Just a faint smell of gasoline. He let the trunk fall shut. "That's not someone's trip gone wrong," Caleb said quietly. "That's someone covering tracks." The wind shifted, carrying smoke sideways. For a brief moment, the firelight flickered across Orion's face, catching in his eyes, turning them into something sharper, deeper. The dog turned his head, not toward the car, toward the forest. Caleb followed. The trees stood still, too still. Snow clung to branches in thick layers, the weight bending them low, creating shadows between trunks that felt deeper than they should. The path was there, narrow, barely visible, but present. A break in the snow where movement had passed through. Caleb took one step toward it. Orion didn't move. "Stay," Caleb said. The command was soft, automatic. Orion didn't obey. Instead, the dog moved ahead, 2 steps into the path, then stopped again, looking back. Not disobedience, invitation, or warning. Caleb exhaled. "Yeah," he murmured. "I figured." He followed. The forest swallowed sound. The moment they stepped off the road, the noise of the fire dulled behind them, replaced by a deeper quiet, the kind that pressed against the ears. Caleb moved carefully, placing each step with intention. The tracks were harder to read here, broken by uneven terrain, patches of exposed rock beneath the snow. But Orion didn't need tracks. He followed the scent. Head low. Tail still. Body aligned forward like an arrow that had already been released. Caleb kept his distance just behind him. He trusted Orion. Not blindly, but enough. The deeper they went, the colder it felt. Not because the temperature had dropped, because the wind had disappeared. The air no longer moved. It just existed. Heavy. Waiting. Caleb's breathing slowed automatically, controlled, steady. His hand brushed lightly against his side, where a weapon would have been once. Now there was nothing, just muscle memory and instinct. They moved for what felt like several minutes, or maybe less. Time didn't behave the same out here. Then Orion stopped. Not gradually, instantly. His body stiffened, not aggressively, but completely. Caleb froze as well. Talk to me, he whispered. Orion didn't turn. He didn't growl. He simply stared ahead. Caleb shifted slightly to the side, adjusting his angle until he could see past the dog. And then he saw him. A man sat against the base of a pine tree. Still. Too still. For a second, Caleb thought he might already be dead. Then the man's head lifted. Slowly. Deliberately. Not startled. Not confused. Aware. The man was older. Early 70s, maybe. Tall even while seated, his frame lean but not weak. His coat, thick and dark gray, was worn at the edges, patched at one elbow. Snow had gathered along his shoulders, melting slightly from the heat of his body. His hair was white, unkempt but not wild, falling just past his ears. His face carried deep lines, not the soft kind of age, but the carved kind, the kind that came from decisions that stayed. His eyes, pale blue, sharp, and very, very awake. In his hands, he held a metal box, gripped tightly, like it was the only thing keeping him anchored to the world. Caleb didn't move closer right away. "Can you stand?" he asked. The man studied him, not quickly, carefully, as if comparing what he saw to something already known. Then, after a pause, the man spoke. His voice was dry but steady. "I was wondering how long it would take." Caleb's brow furrowed slightly. "Take for what?" The man's lips curved, not quite a smile. "For you to find me." Before Caleb could respond, Orion did something unexpected. He stepped forward, slowly, not cautious, not aggressive, and then he sat down, right in front of the man, lowering his head slightly. Not submissive, not protective. Something else. Recognition. Caleb's pulse shifted. That wasn't trained behavior. That wasn't protocol. That was personal. The man looked down at Orion. His hand, gloved and shaking faintly, loosened slightly on the metal box. "Yeah," he murmured softly. "You feel it too, don't you?" Caleb felt something cold move through his chest. Not fear, not yet. Something worse. Connection. Without context. Caleb stepped closer now, slower than before. "Who are you?" he asked. The man's eyes lifted back to his. For a moment, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Then the man answered, "Silas Whitaker." The name didn't land with recognition, but it didn't feel empty either. Caleb nodded once. "You were in the car?" Silas glanced past him, toward the road they had come from. "What's left of it, yeah." "You hurt?" Silas shook his head faintly. "Not in ways you can fix out here." Caleb crouched slightly, scanning him more closely. No major bleeding, no visible fractures, just exhaustion. And something else. Tension. Held deep. "Then why didn't you stay with the vehicle?" Caleb asked. Silas looked back at him, and for the first time, there was something like urgency behind his eyes. "Because the fire wasn't for warmth." Caleb's gaze sharpened. It was a signal. Silas tightened his grip on the box. "And not the kind you want to answer." Snow shifted slightly in the distance. A soft sound. Almost nothing. But enough. Orion's ears flicked. Caleb's head turned instantly. The forest returned to stillness. But it wasn't empty anymore. Caleb felt it. that subtle pressure again. They weren't alone. He looked back at Silas. "Can you walk?" Silas nodded once. "With help." Caleb extended a hand. After a brief hesitation, Silas took it. His grip was stronger than expected. They stood. Orion moved immediately, positioning himself slightly behind and to the side. Watching. Always watching. Caleb adjusted his stance, taking some of Silas's weight. "We're getting you out of here," he said. Silas didn't argue, but as they began to move back toward the road, he spoke again, quiet, almost to himself. "You weren't supposed to be the one." Caleb glanced at him. "What does that mean?" Silas didn't answer, just kept walking. And Orion didn't look back, because whatever had been behind them was no longer trying to hide. The walk back to the road felt longer than it should have, not because of the terrain, not because of Silas's weight leaning slightly into Caleb's shoulder, but because something had shifted. The forest no longer felt like a place they had entered. It felt like something they were leaving behind, reluctantly. Caleb adjusted his grip on Silas, steady but firm. The older man walked with controlled effort, not collapsing, not stumbling, just measured steps, like someone who had already decided how much strength he could afford to spend. "You've been out here long?" Caleb asked without looking at him. Silas didn't answer immediately. "Long enough to know the difference between getting lost and being led somewhere," he said finally. Caleb's jaw tightened slightly. He didn't respond. Orion moved ahead of them now, not far, just enough to clear the path. His posture remained alert, but not tense. Every few seconds, he would pause, glance back, then continue, not checking in, counting. Caleb noticed. He always noticed. They reached the edge of the forest. The sedan still burned, though weaker now. Flames had shrunk inward, eating what little remained. The road stretched empty in both directions. No headlights. No sound of engines. No sign that anyone else had seen the fire. Silas stopped walking. Caleb felt the shift in weight immediately. "What is it?" Silas didn't answer. He was staring at the car. Not at the flames. At the pattern of the burn. Caleb followed his gaze. "You said it was a signal," Caleb said. "For who?" Silas's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. "For people who don't wait for confirmation," he replied. Caleb let that settle. "Then we don't stay here," Caleb said. Silas nodded once. "Exactly." They moved toward the truck. Orion circled once around the vehicle before jumping up into the passenger seat, his movement quick but controlled. He didn't settle down this time. He stayed upright, head angled toward the road behind them. Watching. Caleb helped Silas into the truck. The older man moved carefully, but without hesitation. Once inside, he placed the metal box on his lap, both hands resting on it like it was something fragile or dangerous. Caleb got behind the wheel. The engine turned over with a low, steady growl. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled outside. Snow drifted slowly through the beam of the headlights. Then Caleb shifted the truck into gear. They pulled away. The road felt different now. Not because it had changed, because Caleb had. Every curve ahead felt like something to clear, not something to follow. He checked the rearview mirror once. The fire disappeared behind the trees. Silas spoke quietly. You didn't ask the right question. Caleb kept his eyes on the road. I asked enough. Silas shook his head faintly. You asked what happened. He adjusted his grip on the box. You should be asking why it had to look like that. Caleb exhaled slowly. And why did it? Silas didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned his head slightly back against the seat, eyes half closed, not resting, just thinking. Because whoever set that up, he said finally, needed someone to stop. Caleb's fingers tightened slightly on the wheel. And you were the someone? Silas turned his head just enough to look at him. No, he said. You were. Orion suddenly shifted. Not forward, not toward the road, toward the dashboard. His nose pressed close to the air vents, inhaling sharply, once, then again. Then he let out a low, focused sound. Not warning, not fear, recognition. Caleb frowned. What is it? Orion didn't look at him. He stayed fixed on the airflow, as if something invisible had just entered the cabin. Silas's eyes opened, fully. He didn't move, but his voice dropped. They tagged it, he said. Caleb glanced at him. Tagged what? Silas didn't answer immediately. His gaze moved slowly toward the vents, then toward the windshield, then back to Caleb. The car, he said quietly. They wanted it to carry something. Caleb's mind moved fast, too fast. He reached forward and shut off the air system. The fan died instantly. Silence filled the truck again. Orion's body relaxed slightly, but not completely. Caleb looked ahead again. The road stretched empty, but now it didn't feel empty. It felt watched. They drove in silence for several minutes. Snow thickened slightly, the road narrowing as trees grew closer together. Caleb's cabin wasn't far, 10 minutes, maybe less. Silas shifted slightly in his seat. You live out here alone? He asked. Yes. No neighbors? Closest ranger station is 40 minutes out. Silas nodded slowly. Good. Caleb glanced at him. Good? Silas didn't smile. Fewer variables. Caleb didn't like the way that sounded. What are we dealing with? He asked. Silas looked down at the box in his lap. His fingers tightened slightly around its edges. Something that doesn't like loose ends, he said. Caleb's voice stayed calm. And I'm one of them now? Silas didn't answer directly. He didn't need to. The cabin appeared through the trees, low, solid. Wood darkened by years of weather. Smoke no longer rose from the chimney. Caleb hadn't been back long enough to keep a fire going. It looked exactly as he remembered it. And yet, something felt off. Orion saw it first. The dog's ears, Defrost's ears, lifted sharply. His body leaned forward, tense now, not from the road, from the house. Caleb slowed the truck. Easy, he murmured. But Orion didn't ease. His gaze locked onto the cabin door. Caleb followed it. At first he saw nothing. Then, tracks, fresh, leading to the porch. Not his, not old, recent. Caleb stopped the truck before reaching the cabin. Engine still running. His eyes scanned quickly. Windows, door, tree line. Everything still. Too still. Silas noticed the shift. What is it? He asked. Caleb didn't look at him. "We're not alone," he said. Silas closed his eyes for a brief moment, not surprised, just confirming something he already knew. Caleb reached for the door, then stopped, thought, adjusted. He turned off the engine. Silence dropped hard. Snow fell quietly around them. Orion stepped out first, low, controlled. He moved toward the cabin slowly, nose working, reading the ground, the air, the space between. Caleb followed, every step deliberate. Silas stayed inside the truck, not by accident, by understanding. Orion reached the base of the porch, stopped, then turned his head slightly, not back toward Caleb, toward the left side of the cabin. Caleb's eyes followed. There. A shadow shifted. Just enough. A figure stepped out from the side of the house, hands visible, empty. A woman, mid to late 30s, tall, around 5'8", with a lean, practical build. Her hair was light brown, pulled back into a tight knot at the base of her neck, strands already escaping from wind and snow. Her skin was pale but weathered, the kind shaped by years outdoors rather than time indoors. She wore a dark green ranger jacket, worn but maintained, with a silver badge pinned to the chest. Her posture wasn't defensive, but it wasn't relaxed either. Her eyes locked onto Caleb immediately. Gray, sharp, assessing. "You're late," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, but carried the weight of someone used to being listened to. Caleb didn't lower his guard. "Depends who's asking." The woman stepped closer, boots crunching lightly on the snow. "Megan Hale," she said, "Forest Service." Her gaze shifted briefly to Orion, then to the truck behind Caleb, then back to him. "I was about to assume you weren't coming back." Caleb's expression didn't change. "I don't remember inviting anyone." Megan's lips pressed into a thin line. "You didn't," she said. "I came because someone's been asking about you." Caleb felt that same cold shift again, behind the ribs. "Who?" Megan held his gaze for a moment, then said, "People who don't leave tracks." Silas spoke from the truck, quiet, but clear. "They found you too." Megan's head turned sharply. Her eyes landed on him, and for the first time, she looked surprised. The wind moved again. Soft, but enough. Carrying something unseen through the trees. And for a moment, none of them spoke, because all three of them understood the same thing at the same time. Whatever had started on that road had already reached the cabin. The cabin stood exactly where Caleb had left it, and yet it didn't feel like his. The wooden walls were darkened by years of weather, the porch slightly tilted from the slow settling of earth beneath frost. Snow rested along the edges of the roof, untouched in some places, disturbed in others. Caleb noticed that first. Not the door, not the windows. The snow, patterns where there shouldn't be any. He stepped onto the porch slowly, boots pressing into a thin layer of powder that had already been compressed once before. Orion moved ahead of him, lower now, his body closer to the ground, every step measured. His nose hovered just above the wood, tracking something Caleb couldn't yet see. Megan remained a few steps behind, her eyes scanning the tree line rather than the cabin itself. She wasn't looking for what had already happened. She was looking for what might still be out there. Silas stayed in the truck, not because he was afraid, because he understood the sequence. Caleb reached the door. It wasn't broken. It wasn't forced. It was simply not locked. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he pressed his hand lightly against the wood, feeling the surface. Cold, but not evenly. One section, just below the handle, held a faint trace of warmth. Recent. He glanced back at Megan. "You came inside?" he asked. Megan shook her head immediately. "No." Her voice was firm. "If I had, I'd have waited inside, not out here." Caleb believed her, not because of her words, because of her posture. People who lied tended to shift their weight, overcompensate with their eyes. Megan stood still, grounded, certain. Caleb turned back to the door and pushed it open. The cabin breathed differently. That was the first thing he felt. Not saw. Felt. The air inside wasn't stale the way it should have been. It carried warmth. Faint. Lingering. The fireplace in the corner still held a dull glow beneath the ash, a quiet ember refusing to die. Caleb stepped in. Orion followed immediately, moving past him without hesitation, sweeping the room in a slow arc. The cabin was small. One main room, a narrow kitchen space, a hallway leading to a bedroom and storage. Everything was where Caleb had left it. Except a chair, pulled slightly away from the table, just enough to suggest someone had stood from it recently. Caleb's eyes locked onto it. "How long since you've been back?" Megan asked from the doorway. 3 weeks, Caleb replied. Megan stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Snow muffled the sound. Silence settled again. She moved with quiet efficiency, her boots careful not to disturb more than necessary. Up close, she looked exactly like someone shaped by the land she worked in. Not delicate, not hardened in a dramatic way. Just practical. The kind of person who didn't waste movement or words. Her gray eyes moved from surface to surface, picking up small details without lingering. "Fire's too fresh," she said. "Someone didn't just pass through. They stayed." Caleb nodded slightly. "I see it." Orion moved toward the hallway. Stopped. His ears angled forward. Not alert. Listening. Caleb followed. "Bedroom?" Megan asked. "Yes." Caleb stepped past him. The hallway felt narrower than he remembered. The kind of space that forced you to commit to moving forward. He reached the doorway and paused. The bed was untouched. Covers still tight. No signs of sleep. But on the small wooden desk beside it, a single object. Not his, a folded piece of paper, placed carefully, centered, deliberate. Caleb approached slowly, picked it up, unfolded it. Inside there was no message, no words, just a simple mark, a symbol drawn in dark ink, a circle, broken at one point. Caleb stared at it. Something stirred in his memory, not clear, not formed, but present. Behind him, Megan stepped closer. "You recognize it?" she asked. Caleb shook his head slowly. "Not exactly." He folded the paper again, slipped it into his pocket. "We didn't have time to leave signs like this." he added quietly. Megan studied him for a moment. That's not a warning, she said. That's a message. Caleb didn't argue. He turned back toward the main room. Silas was no longer in the truck. Caleb's eyes shifted immediately. The door, still closed, no sound of it opening. But when he stepped back into the room, Silas was there, standing just inside the cabin, the metal box still in his hands. Megan reacted instantly, turning toward him, posture tightening. You move fast for someone your age, she said. Silas didn't look at her. His eyes were on the fireplace, then the chair, then Caleb. They've been inside, he said quietly. Caleb nodded. Yes. Silas stepped further in. Slow, measured. He stopped near the table. His hand hovered briefly over the chair. Didn't touch it. They didn't search, he said. Megan frowned. How can you tell? Silas glanced at her. Because everything is still where it belongs. He gestured slightly around the room. People who search, disrupt. His gaze returned to Caleb. These people didn't come to find something. Caleb's voice dropped. They came to confirm something. Silas nodded. Orion suddenly froze. Not near the door. Not near the hallway. At the center of the room. His body went still, completely still, as if something inside him had locked into place. Then slowly, he turned. Not toward any of them, toward the far wall. Blank wood. Nothing there. Caleb followed his gaze. There's nothing. Orion stepped forward. One step, then another, until he reached the wall and stopped. He lifted his nose, pressed it lightly against the wood, then exhaled. Long, slow, and sat down. Caleb felt something tighten in his chest. What is it? Orion didn't move, didn't look back. He simply stayed there, as if guarding something, or waiting for it. Caleb stepped closer. His eyes scanned the wall. Nothing visible. Just old wood. Weathered. But then, a faint line. Almost invisible. A seam. Not part of the original structure. Caleb reached out. Pressed lightly. The panel shifted. Just slightly. Megan stepped forward. What is that? Caleb didn't answer. He pushed harder. The wood gave way, and behind it, a narrow compartment. Hidden. Old. Inside there was only one thing. A small rectangular device. Dust-covered, but intact. Caleb picked it up, turned it over. His breath caught. Military issue. Old. Very old. And on the back, a name. Burned into the metal. Rourke. Silas didn't react with surprise. Only confirmation. I was hoping it was still there, he said. Caleb looked at him sharply. You knew about this? Silas met his eyes. I knew he would leave something. Caleb's grip tightened around the device. He? Silas didn't answer. Megan looked between them. You two want to explain what's going on? She asked. Caleb didn't respond immediately. His mind was already moving. Fast. Too fast. "This wasn't random," he said finally. "They didn't come to find this." He looked at the hidden compartment. "They came to see if it was still here." Silas nodded once. "And now they know." The wind rose outside. Soft at first, then stronger. Branches shifted. Snow fell from the roof in a quiet cascade. Inside, the cabin felt smaller. Not physically, but in the way space closes when something invisible steps into it. Megan moved toward the window, looked out. Nothing. But her shoulders didn't relax. "How long do we have?" she asked. Silas answered, "Not long." Caleb looked down at the device in his hand, then at Orion. The dog hadn't moved. Still sitting. Still watching that same space, as if something unseen had already arrived. Caleb exhaled slowly. "We're not staying here," he said. Megan nodded. Agreed. Silas didn't argue, because they all understood the same thing now. The cabin had never been empty. It had just been waiting. The engine sound didn't belong to the forest. It was too controlled, too deliberate. Caleb didn't move immediately. He stood in the center of the cabin, the old military device still in his hand, the weight of it pressing deeper than metal should. Megan was already at the window, her body angled slightly to reduce her silhouette. Her eyes tracked through the narrow opening between the curtains. "Single vehicle," she said quietly. "Low idle, no headlights." Silas didn't turn toward the window. He didn't need to. "They're here earlier than I expected," he murmured. Caleb's jaw tightened. "How many?" Megan leaned in slightly, adjusting her angle. "Hard to tell. One vehicle, maybe two inside. They're not rushing." Caleb nodded once. "Good," he said. Megan glanced at him. "Good?" "They're confident," Caleb replied. "That means they think we're contained." He moved toward the table, setting the newly discovered device down carefully. His movements were calm, precise, but there was a shift now. Not panic. Alignment. The kind that came when uncertainty finally took shape. Silas stepped closer. "You don't understand yet," he said quietly. Caleb looked at him. "Then start talking." Silas hesitated, not out of fear, out of choice. He placed the metal box on the table. For a moment, his hand stayed on it. Then he opened it. Inside, everything was exactly where it had been preserved. A SEAL insignia, dulled by time but still intact. A folded map, edges worn, markings scratched out as if someone had tried to erase a place rather than find it. And the recorder. Compact. Military grade. Old, but functional. Caleb picked it up. His thumb hovered over the switch. For a fraction of a second, he didn't press it. Not because he was unsure, because some part of him already knew that whatever came next would not give him the option to step back. Then he activated it. Static, low, uneven. Then, a voice. Distorted, but unmistakable. Older, familiar. "Caleb." The name came through like it had been carried across distance, not time. Caleb didn't breathe. "If you're hearing this, it means they didn't bury everything." Silas closed his eyes. Megan stayed still. Only Orion shifted slightly, his ears angling toward the sound, his body lowering just enough to center himself. The voice continued. Don't trust the report. Don't trust the signal cut. Not gradually, not fading, severed. Caleb's thumb pressed the button again. Nothing, just static. He lowered the device slowly. His voice, when it came, was steady. That wasn't a transmission. Silas nodded. No. A recording. Yes. Caleb's eyes didn't leave the device. It was interrupted, he said. Silas met his gaze. Or stopped. Outside, the engine cut. Silence followed. Heavy. Immediate. Megan stepped back from the window. They're out of the vehicle. Caleb nodded once. Distance. 50 yards. Maybe less. Silas closed the box. His movements were slower now, not weaker. Final. They won't knock, he said. Caleb glanced at him. I wasn't expecting them to. Orion suddenly moved. Not toward the door, not toward the window. He turned back toward the table, toward the open box. The dog stepped closer, his nose hovering just above the contents. He ignored the badge, ignored the map, focused on the recorder. Then, he let out a low, controlled sound. Not warning. Recognition. Caleb felt it immediately. What is it? Orion didn't respond directly. Instead, he lowered his head, pressing lightly against Caleb's thigh. Not seeking reassurance. Anchoring. Caleb's mind shifted. Fast. The dog wasn't reacting to the voice. He was reacting to something about the device itself. Something recent. Something active. Caleb turned the recorder over again. Examined the edges. Then he saw it. A faint line. Hair thin. Not part of the original casing. A seam. Recently opened. His breath slowed. This wasn't left here years ago, Caleb said. Silas looked at him. No, he replied quietly. They've already been inside. Megan's voice cut in, sharper now. They're moving. Caleb stepped away from the table. His posture changed completely. Not defensive, operational. Back exit, he said. Megan nodded immediately, already moving. Silas didn't hesitate this time. He picked up the box, holding it tighter now. Where are we going? Megan asked. Caleb's answer came without pause. Not far. He moved toward the rear hallway. Just far enough? The back door opened into darkness. No porch, no light, just trees. Snow fell softly, masking sound. Caleb stepped out first. Orion followed instantly, positioning himself slightly ahead, scanning left, then right. Megan came next, her movement efficient, controlled. Silas last. Caleb didn't close the door. He left it slightly ajar. A decision, not an accident. They moved into the trees. Not deep, not fast, just enough to disappear. Caleb guided them along a shallow slope, angled away from the direct line of sight from the front of the cabin. He knew this terrain. Every rise, every dip, every place where sound carried, and where it didn't. They stopped behind a cluster of dense pine. From here, they could see the cabin, but the cabin couldn't see them. Megan crouched low, her breathing controlled. Two, she whispered. Caleb followed her gaze. Two figures approached the front door, both dressed in dark winter gear, faces covered. Movements precise, not cautious. Certain. They're not local, Megan said. Caleb didn't respond. He was watching something else. The way they moved, the way they spaced themselves, the way they didn't speak. He had seen that before. Too many times. Silas spoke quietly. They don't need confirmation anymore. Caleb's voice was low. No. They came to remove variables. The first man reached the door, pushed it open, didn't check, didn't hesitate. The second stayed outside, watching. Caleb's eyes narrowed. They're not searching, he said. Megan glanced at him. How can you tell? Because they already know what's inside. Silas tightened his grip on the box. They know what they think is inside. Caleb looked at him. What's the difference? Silas met his gaze. What they think, and what actually is, stopped matching a long time ago. Inside the cabin, movement. Shadows shifted. The man inside didn't take long. Less than a minute. Then he stepped back out. Empty-handed. He shook his head once. The second man didn't react. Didn't speak. They both turned. Walking back toward the vehicle. No rush. No urgency. Just completion. Megan frowned. That's it? Caleb's eyes stayed locked on them. No, he said quietly. That's confirmation. The vehicle started again. Headlights remained off. The engine faded slowly into the distance. Silence returned. Real silence this time. Megan exhaled. That was too easy. Caleb didn't respond. He stood there, still watching the road long after the sound was gone. Orion shifted slightly beside him, then sat. Not relaxed. Present. Waiting. Caleb finally turned back. We're not going back in yet, he said. Megan nodded. Agreed. Silas looked down at the box in his hands, then back at Caleb. They heard it too, he said. Caleb frowned slightly. Heard what? Silas's expression didn't change. The message. Caleb's grip tightened. That recording's been sitting here for years. Silas shook his head slowly. No. He looked toward the cabin, then back at Caleb. It's been waiting. The wind moved again, soft, cold, carrying nothing and everything. Caleb looked at Orion. The dog met his gaze, still, steady, no fear, just presence. Caleb exhaled slowly. Then we stop reacting, he said. Megan raised an eyebrow. And start what? Caleb's voice dropped. We start asking the right questions. Behind them, the forest remained silent, but it wasn't empty. It was listening. The forest did not relax after the vehicle left. It only pretended to. Caleb stayed still for several seconds after the sound faded, his eyes fixed on the road long after there was nothing left to see. The silence that followed was too complete, too controlled, like a room after a conversation that had ended too cleanly. Orion remained seated beside him, posture upright, ears forward, not tracking movement anymore, listening. That told Caleb everything. They're not done, he said quietly. Megan exhaled slowly through her nose. No, that wasn't a sweep. That was a check. Silas stood slightly behind them, both hands gripping the metal box, his knuckles pale under the thin skin. "They wanted to confirm we're here," he said. Caleb finally turned away from the road. "Then we assume they'll be back," he replied. He scanned the tree line again, this time slower, not looking for movement, looking for patterns, disruptions, places where something didn't belong. The snow had settled again. No fresh tracks, no shadows shifting between trunks. And yet, the pressure remained. Caleb had felt it before, in places where the enemy wasn't trying to be seen, only to be sure you knew they were there. "Move," Caleb said. Not loudly, not urgently, just enough. Megan nodded and followed immediately. Silas hesitated for half a breath, then moved as well. Orion rose without command, slipping ahead of them, his movement smooth, controlled, his body aligned low as he began to cut diagonally through the trees. Not toward the road, away from it. They moved deeper into the forest. Not far. Just far enough that the cabin disappeared behind them. Caleb stopped near a shallow dip in the terrain, a natural break in elevation where the trees grew denser and the wind lost its strength. "This holds," he said. Megan crouched beside a fallen log, scanning through a narrow opening toward where the cabin had been. "Not for long," she replied. Caleb nodded. "Long enough." Silas remained standing, not out of defiance, out of habit. His eyes moved between Caleb and the direction they had come from, measuring something only he fully understood. "They're not tracking us by sight," Silas said. Caleb glanced at him. "What makes you sure?" Silas shifted his grip on the box. "Because they didn't follow immediately." Megan added quietly, "Which means they don't need to." Caleb's jaw tightened slightly. "Then we assume they marked something." Orion moved again, not randomly, purposefully. He angled away from them, heading toward a patch of trees near the edge of the slope. Caleb noticed instantly. "Orion." The dog didn't stop, didn't look back. He moved with quiet urgency now, his nose close to the ground, tracing something that Caleb couldn't yet see. Megan stood. "What is he doing?" Caleb didn't answer. He followed. The ground shifted slightly underfoot as they approached the edge of the slope. Snow thinned here, exposing patches of frozen earth and rock beneath. Orion slowed, then stopped. He stood over a small, uneven section of ground. His front paws braced, his body angled forward. Then he began to dig. Not frantically, not erratically. Precise, controlled. Each movement deliberate. Clearing snow in a tight radius. Caleb crouched beside him. "What is it?" Orion didn't respond. He kept digging. Megan stepped closer, watching. "That's not random," she said. Caleb shook his head. "No." After a few seconds, Orion's paw struck something solid, a dull, metallic sound beneath the snow. Caleb reached forward, brushing the remaining snow aside. A rectangular object emerged. Old, dark, partially buried. He pulled it free. It was heavier than it looked. A military beacon. Weathered, but intact. Caleb turned it over in his hands. His eyes scanned the surface quickly, then stopped. Engraving. Faint, but still visible. Coordinates, and a date. Years ago. His chest tightened. "This has been here a long time," he said. Silas stepped closer, not surprised, only quieter. "He hid it well," Silas murmured. Caleb looked at him. "You knew this was here." Silas didn't deny it. "I knew something was left behind," he said. "Not exactly where." Caleb's voice lowered. "My father?" Silas met his gaze. "Yes." Orion suddenly stopped digging, not because he was finished, because something changed. He froze. His head lifted slowly. Not toward the beacon, not toward Caleb, toward the distance. His ears tilted slightly, catching something too faint for human hearing. Then, he took one step back and sat. Calm. Still. Caleb felt the shift immediately. "What is it?" Orion didn't move, didn't react further. He simply waited. Caleb turned, scanning the trees. Nothing. No sound. No movement. But then, a flicker. Far between the trunks. Not light. Not reflection. Movement. Gone as quickly as it appeared. Megan saw it too. Her voice dropped. "We're not alone out here." Silas exhaled slowly. "No," he said. "They just decided to let us find it first." Caleb's grip tightened around the beacon. That wasn't coincidence. That wasn't luck. That was design. Caleb stood slowly, the weight of the device grounding him. "They didn't miss this," he said. Megan shook her head. "No chance." Silas looked at the beacon, then at Caleb. "They wanted you to have it." Caleb's expression hardened. "Or they wanted to see what I'd do with it." Megan crossed her arms slightly, thinking. "Either way, we just stepped into their timeline." Caleb nodded. "Yeah." He looked down at the device again. Old military hardware, designed to transmit location, or receive it. "Still active?" Megan asked. Caleb tilted it slightly, checking the seams, the casing. "Doesn't matter," he said. "If it isn't, they already know where it was." Silas stepped closer. "You need to understand something," he said. Caleb looked up. "My father didn't leave this for them," Caleb said. Silas nodded. "No. He left it for someone who would ask the right questions." Caleb held his gaze. "And you think that's me?" Silas didn't smile. "I know it is." The wind shifted again, stronger this time. Branches creaked. Snow fell in soft cascades from above. The forest moved. Just enough. Caleb took a slow breath, then made a decision. "We don't carry it," he said. Megan frowned. "What?" Caleb looked at the beacon, then back at the ground. "We don't take it with us." Silas's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why?" Caleb's voice was calm. "Because they expect us to." He crouched again, placed the device back into the shallow hole, not exactly as before, but close enough, then covered it, layer by layer, snow, pressed down, disturbed just enough to look natural. Megan watched carefully. "You're leaving it?" Caleb stood. "I'm leaving the version they think we'll take." Silas studied him. understanding forming slowly. You're changing the sequence. Caleb nodded. Yeah. Orion stood, moved back to Caleb's side. His posture shifted slightly, less alert, more aligned. Megan glanced between them. Where to now? Caleb looked deeper into the forest. Not toward the cabin, not toward the road. A third direction. We stop following what they expect, he said. Megan raised an eyebrow. And start doing what? Caleb's voice dropped slightly. We find out why my father never came back. Silas tightened his grip on the box. That answer doesn't end clean, he said. Caleb didn't look at him. It doesn't have to. Behind them, the buried beacon rested beneath the snow. Silent. Still. But no longer forgotten. And somewhere in the forest, something watched. Not moving. Not approaching. Just waiting. The forest did not argue with the decision. It simply waited for it. Caleb stood where the trees began to thin, where the slope dipped just enough to reveal the narrow road below. Snow lay untouched in long, quiet stretches, interrupted only by the faint lines of tire tracks that had already begun to fade. The world looked still, but it wasn't. Nothing had been still since he turned the engine off hours ago. Behind him, Megan shifted her weight, her breath controlled but heavier now. She had followed him this far without questioning direction, without asking for clarity. That was her nature. Observe first, judge later. Silas stood farther back, one hand still resting on the metal box as if it were the only thing keeping his balance anchored to something real. Orion stood closest to Caleb, not in front, not behind. Beside him. The dog's posture was different now. Not searching, not guarding, waiting. Caleb looked down at him. The German shepherd's coat caught the dim light, black along the spine, deep gold along the legs and chest. His ears were upright, steady, angled slightly forward, listening for something deeper than sound. His amber-brown eyes met Caleb's, not asking, not warning, just present. Caleb exhaled slowly. I know, he murmured. Megan finally spoke. You're not going back to the truck. It wasn't a question. Caleb shook his head. No. Silence followed, the kind that didn't need to be filled. Megan stepped closer. Then we need a plan. Caleb nodded once. We have one. She crossed her arms slightly. Which is? Caleb looked back toward the cabin, not with hesitation, with recognition. We stop letting them decide what happens next. Megan studied him carefully. And what does that look like? Caleb didn't answer immediately, because the answer wasn't tactical. It was personal. Silas stepped forward, slow, measured. His face carried something it hadn't before. Not fear, not urgency, relief. You understand now, he said quietly. Caleb turned to him. My father didn't disappear, Caleb said. Silas shook his head. No. He refused. Caleb's jaw tightened. Refused what? Silas held his gaze. Refused to sign off on something that should never have been buried. Megan frowned. What kind of something? Silas didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on Caleb. The kind that makes people decide it's easier if you stop existing. Caleb felt that settle. Heavy. Not surprising. Just confirmed. Orion suddenly moved. Not toward the road. Not toward the trees. Back. Toward the cabin. 3 steps. Then he stopped, turned his head slightly, looked at Caleb, then back at the cabin again. He didn't bark, didn't signal. He simply stood there, waiting. Caleb's chest tightened. That wasn't direction. That was memory. Not the dog's. His. A flicker passed through Caleb's mind. Not a full image. Just a fragment. A voice. His father's voice. Calm. Steady. If you ever feel like the road is pulling you forward, a pause. It means you're supposed to stop. Caleb blinked once. The memory vanished as quickly as it came, but the weight remained. He looked at Orion. The dog hadn't moved, still watching him, still waiting. Caleb nodded slowly. Yeah, he whispered. I hear it. Megan noticed the shift. What is it? She asked. Caleb turned back toward her. We don't leave, he said. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes sharpened. That's not a defensive position, she said. No, Caleb replied. It's not. Silas stepped closer. They'll come back, he said. Caleb nodded. I know. And this time, Silas added, they won't check. Caleb met his gaze. Good. The word landed differently than Megan expected. She tilted her head slightly. You want them to come back? Caleb didn't hesitate. Yes. Megan studied him for a moment, then exhaled quietly. All right, she said. Then we make sure we're ready when they do. They moved back toward the cabin. Not rushed, not cautious, deliberate. Caleb stepped onto the porch first. The wood creaked beneath his boots, the sound echoing slightly in the still air. He paused at the door. Not because he expected resistance, because this time he was choosing to enter. Not returning. Choosing. He pushed the door open. Inside, the cabin felt smaller, not because of what had changed, because of what hadn't. The chair was still slightly out of place. The fire had died further, leaving only faint warmth behind. The space still carried the presence of those who had been there. But now, it felt different. Not watched. Occupied. Caleb stepped in. Orion followed, moving past him, taking position near the center of the room. Megan entered next, her eyes scanning automatically, noting every shift, every detail. Silas came last. He closed the door behind him. Soft. Final. Caleb moved to the table. Set the recorder down, then the box, then his hands, flat against the surface. He looked at both of them. We stop reacting, he said. Megan nodded. And start what? Caleb's eyes lifted. Finishing what he started. Silas's grip tightened slightly on the edge of the table. You don't know what that means yet, he said. Caleb met his gaze. I don't need to. Silas studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Slowly. Megan stepped closer. You're talking about exposing something, she said. Caleb didn't deny it. Yes. Her jaw tightened slightly. You realize that doesn't end with them walking away. Caleb's voice was steady. I'm not asking them to. Outside, the wind stilled, completely. The kind of stillness that didn't belong to weather. It belonged to timing. Orion's ears lifted, not sharply, just enough. His body shifted slightly. Weight forward. Ready. Caleb noticed. Positions, he said quietly. Megan moved immediately, taking the left side near the window. Silas stepped back, not retreating, but placing himself where he wouldn't be exposed. Caleb remained where he was, at the center. Orion stayed beside him, not in front. Beside. The sound came. Not loud, not sudden. A step. On wood. The porch. Then another. Measured. Controlled. Not hiding. Caleb didn't move. Didn't reach for anything. Didn't speak. The door handle shifted. Slowly. Then stopped. As if whoever stood outside knew exactly where everyone inside was and was deciding what to do next. Caleb's voice broke the silence. Calm. Even. You already came once. A pause. Then, the handle moved again. This time, the door opened. A man stepped inside. Alone. He removed his hood slowly. Mid-40s. Tall. Broad-shouldered. His face was clean-shaven, but sharp, cut with lines that didn't come from age, but from years of controlled expression. His hair was dark, cropped short, flecked slightly with gray at the temples. His eyes were the most noticeable thing. Cold. Not in emotion. In calculation. The kind of eyes that measured outcomes before they happened. He didn't look at Megan. Didn't look at Silas. He looked at Caleb. And only Caleb. You took longer than expected, the man said. His voice was smooth, controlled. Caleb didn't react. Depends on what you were expecting. The man stepped further inside, closed the door behind him. Not aggressively, carefully. My name is Victor Kane, he said, though I doubt that matters to you yet. Caleb's eyes didn't leave him. It will, Kane added. Silas's voice came from behind. You shouldn't have come in alone. Kane didn't turn. I didn't come alone, he said calmly. I came first. The air shifted again, not from wind, from presence. Megan tightened her stance slightly. Orion didn't move, but his body changed. Lower, more focused. Caleb saw it, felt it, and understood. Kane's gaze flicked briefly to Orion, then back to Caleb. Your father made a similar choice once, he said. Caleb's expression didn't change. And how did that work out? Kane's lips moved slightly. Not quite a smile. He stayed, Kane said, and everything that followed stayed with him. Silence filled the room, but this time, it wasn't empty. It was full of something waiting to break. Caleb took one step forward. Not aggressive, not defensive, decisive. I'm not leaving, he said. Cain nodded once. I know. Outside, the road remained still, snow untouched, the world unchanged. But inside the cabin, everything had already shifted, because this time, Caleb hadn't followed the road. He had chosen to stay on it. At the end of this story, what remains is not the fire, not the chase, and not even the truth that was uncovered. What remains is the quiet realization that no one is ever truly alone on the road they are meant to walk. Caleb thought he had survived by chance. He believed he had simply outlived something that others could not. But the truth is something deeper. He was guided. Not by signs written in the sky, but by a dog who knew where to stop, by a path that refused to let him turn away, and by a moment that came exactly when he was ready to face it. Sometimes, God does not remove the storm. He places you inside it and sends exactly what you need to make it through. In our own lives, we all face moments like that. Moments where nothing makes sense, where the road feels too quiet or too dangerous to continue. But what if those moments are not meant to break you? What if they are meant to lead you somewhere you were always meant to be? Sometimes, the help you need does not arrive as a miracle you can see. Sometimes, it comes as a person, a memory, a feeling you cannot explain, or even a quiet voice inside you saying, "Don't turn back." If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on your own journey. Think about the times when something or someone showed up exactly when you needed it most. Share this story with someone who might be walking through their own storm right now. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from and what part of this story stayed with you. And if you believe that God still works through ordinary moments and unexpected paths, consider subscribing to the channel so we can continue sharing stories like this. May God bless you, protect your path, and guide you through every storm you face.